Well, hi Sonja, welcome to our podcast. Thank you for coming on again. It's always nice to have people coming back on, again expanding on their recovery journeys. And we've been doing trying to do. Oh, well, again, it's been in my mind anyway to do a little series sort of called The Bridge, and sort of just focusing on the bridge, like in AA 12 step program book. It says the bridge to normal living, and you sort of realise over my journey that when you stop drinking and stop taking drugs, you kind of realise you're still a little bit mental, and you can have a lot of emotional and mental disorders and phobias and fears and all kinds of stuff going on that's got to kind of be dealt with. And it can make that bridge and that journey into recovery and ongoing recovery can be quite a difficult process. It's not like an easy task, and I'm always surprised, even like working in addiction treatment for all the years that I have, that actually anybody makes it, because it is and just watching people do their journey. And again, of course, you're somebody that have watched journey from the beginning and seen all the struggles and difficulties that you've had to go through, but you made it. And so we sort of just wanted to sort of talk about that. But I think it'd be good to start with how many years you got now in recovery?
So my last recovery birthday was in October last year, and that was my 16th year. So I'm into my 17th year now, which is a miracle.
It is a miracle. And so I guess it's like from that point is maybe giving a bit of background on sort of where you come from, and then maybe like what difficulties you were having before you actually entered into recovery, like how sort of far down the scale did you kind of go with it, and what was kind of happening for you. I'll hand over to you for a little while. I might just jump in and ask some questions. I mean, I know a lot about you, but other people don't, so if I'm asking any questions I already know, but it's for that reason.
Okay. So as far as my addiction went, I think I probably started using substances when I was about 16, and it escalated very quickly. By the time I was 21, I was using cocaine and heroin, and heroin and crack, between 20 and 22. And
just an interesting thing, sorry, debating so quickly, just because again, is that starting?
So
what is it that made you? What was it that sort of introduced you to using?
So although my family, although my mum was an alcoholic, but she didn't bring me up. My mum lived in Finland, and I was brought up by my dad. And although there was dysfunction and there was lots of stuff going on in my family, which caused me to have quite a lot of trauma, there was no, at that point in my life, that I wasn't exposed to any drug taking, any criminality that I was aware of, or any drinking. My dad used to drink probably once a year or twice a year at Christmas. But at 15, 16, I was attracted to and couldn't wait to get close to and be near and be involved with all the skinheads that were glue sniffing at the time. That was in the early 80s. So although there was lots of dysfunction and stuff in my family at that point, alcohol and drugs, there was nothing. I'd never experienced it. And so I don't know why I ever was attracted to that kind of the darkness. I just wanted to go and feel part of something, belong in something. I think because I never kind of felt, I never felt right. I never felt like, I never felt right. I think due to being a band, my mum kind of went off with someone else when I was 7, when we lived in Finland, and my dad brought me and my sister back over here, And I think that I never realised at that point the damage that done to me, the traumatic experience of what I experienced. I didn't really realise it until I was in recovery. Looking back now, I can see what happened and I could feel what happened, but at that point I never understood kind of why am I like this. I mean, because there's two things going on. You know what I've learned in my recovery as I've when I first got clean in the first couple of years, I remember you saying to me, you've got two issues going on there. You've got all your childhood experiences, plus you've got the addiction, and I think that was a really, really helpful thing that I learned when I was first getting clean, is that addiction's one thing and the trauma's another thing. So there was two things that needed to be dealt with there. I mean, the trauma stuff you can kind of start looking at that as you're going through the steps and opening up and having a little look to see what's going on. But the addiction's one thing and the trauma's another thing. So I think that was a big learning curve for me.
So I think dysfunction and relationship issues is a real gateway for a lot of people, because again, I think there's that like we're talking to Kelly and other people, that people go, oh well, I started drinking because I got abused or parents left. It's like, well, that's not why you started drinking. You started drinking because everybody drank and you had a drink and you liked it, but you didn't think, oh, I feel less than, I need to go and have a beer and snort some coke. That sort of come along. But so just asking, trying to highlight that bit really, that you said you kind of like no real sort of desire to get drunk or use drugs, but the desire was to be a part of this skinheads and this group of people. What was it that was attracting you to them, do you think?
So I think it was just wild. I think they just done what they wanted. They were a bit probably rebellious, a bit of anarchy in there, and I think that's probably what I was attracted to, and no one bothered them. And I think a lot of it for me as well, I just wanted to get away from the home. Was you rebellious, or was you just sort of becoming rebellious? Just becoming rebellious, yeah. I think when I was 16, I first started to get rebellious. Yeah. I used to lie to my dad. I was brought up in a very strict household. I wasn't allowed to go out like my friends were when you're 15, 16. They was all going out, they had boyfriends, and but I couldn't. I was nowhere near at that point when I was that age, and I just didn't have the capacity to be able to kind of form them natural relationships, and I just wanted to go out and rebel, and I just wanted to go and rebel and just really say fuck you to everybody. So that was like they looked like a bit of freedom then. Yeah, I felt free, and I remember when I first left home, I had my hair shaved at the sides, I dyed it blue, extremely rebellious, and it really, it was that kind of Sex Pistols kind of anarchy, definitely, from a very young age. And you left home then as well? I left home around this time. I left home at 16, and because my dad wouldn't let me go to a party, this skinhead party that was on, and he wouldn't let me go, and I just decided one afternoon, that's it, I'm leaving. And I said, I'm going. I packed my stuff, and I went, and I was gone into the yonder. I didn't even have anywhere to go. I just went and stayed with a friend for a little while, and I think I stayed there for a few weeks, and then I ended up in the gloomy kind of York Road area of Southend, which is notorious for drugs, and the red light area. It was real bedsit land. Everyone was unemployed, and I felt a sense of freedom from that. I felt like I kind of belonged, and it just made me feel really happy being amongst them people. Yeah. But I've never ever experienced anything like that in my life.
Yeah, that's not an uncommon kind of feeling that people, they sort of look for that kind of group of people, and it makes them feel like they fit in, like you feel that acceptance that you probably didn't
I was
feel.
accepted. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And so, sort of, how did that develop for you?
So that kind of went from that. So that started me off on the benefit life. I think I might have been the only person in my family that had ever claimed benefits. I started claiming benefits. I had a bed sit in York Road. I think for a time a lot of it, I've got to be honest, is a bit of a haze. I can't remember lots of it. I remember sleeping in my, I can't remember why and how, but I remember sleeping in my brother's mum's car for a period when I was in my teens. That was my dad's second wife, who he'd also separated from. I remember sleeping in her car for some time, and I think that I can't. A lot of it's a haze, and so it was a bedsit land really, and that's when I started smoking weed,
So
started going
you
out
didn't really
drinking.
have a plan on. You weren't like trying to think of a career or job, or you were just sort of all right being an adult, doing your
Never,
thing.
never had any dreams, never had any aspirations. I didn't have any zest to do good. I didn't have any plans of any education. I just, for some reason, I just switched off from my whole family, and I just went underground. Literally, I went underground for years in this dark kind of abyss of York Road in Southend.
But you weren't
Where the drug
unhappy.
culture was, the criminal. No,
Yeah.
no, no. I felt happy. I felt like I belonged. I felt like I felt like just navigating my way through life. There were periods. I remember there's a split second moment that I seem to remember. I remember walking down Southend Seafront one day, and I remember thinking that surely someone is going to come and help me. Surely someone's going to pick me up and come and help me. I felt there were periods where I felt so lost and so kind of alone in amongst all that. But I think that became a normality for me. So it didn't feel like there was a problem. That just became like a normality for me.
What would you say then? You kind of felt like you sort of like someone to rescue you.
Yeah, definitely.
What
It felt like some.
would you think, like your dad or someone to
Sorry,
come
what?
and? Do you think your dad should have come and got you, or?
Absolutely, yeah. I never understand. I never kind of understand. I mean, my dad's very ill now. He's got Alzheimer's, dementia. So he's very, very unwell living in Spain. And I just, as a mother now myself, I've got a 28-year-old daughter. I could never understand how someone who's not using drugs or drinking, and someone that's supposedly in their right mind, who would let their daughter leave home at 16 and not go and find them, or not try and make any kind of connection, or see what's going on, or find out what's going on.
But would you say?
I just
again,
never understand it.
because again, I guess you're sort of saying, sort of thinking about the fact that you was looking for somewhere to join in, and you just shut off from your family. That would say, didn't probably feel loved. You didn't feel loved by your
No,
family or your parents.
definitely. There were some of my family members, like my auntie and my cousin. There was some, and my nan, who passed away some years ago when I was in prison. I did feel really loved by them, but I definitely didn't. I think that my mum, when she left us in Finland, and my dad brought us over here, I think that had such a massive negative impact on the rest of my life, and I guess it's still having that impact today, although I'm getting better from it. that had such a negative impact on me. Yeah, I think it just rocked my soul.
So you
It kind of broke me, I guess, a little bit.
Recovered from that.
No, and then for years, like, because she left my dad, and my dad was heartbroken. I don't think my dad ever understood really what went on. My dad used to say things like this to me: "Your mum didn't love you anyway. Your mum never loved you." And when I was younger, trying to make contact with her, so that kind of reinforced that, because how I perceive that is that I'm unlovable. I never perceived that to be like there's something wrong with her. It's her issue, and it wasn't a reflection on me. I just perceived that as, actually, Sonja, you're unlovable, and that's a catastrophic thing for a child to start experiencing when they're so young from their mum.
Yeah. And I guess you went, that kind of played out, I guess, sort of being unlovable eventually. Then you started sort of playing that out and become a little bit more unlovable. You're not weren't really doing anything to be lovable.
Well, the thing I've learned is, since being clean, is that when parents neglect or abuse you and you're a child, the child doesn't start to neglect and abuse the parent, the child starts to neglect and abuse themselves. So that's definitely, when I heard that, when someone said that to me, I said, oh my God, I can totally relate to it. So rather than me thinking my mum's very selfish and she's kind of hasn't had a great upbringing herself, so what she's doing is a reflection on her, I took it as it was a reflection on me for all my life. But now I can kind of see, because I made the peace with my mum before she passed away in 2018, and I know that now, I know in my heart, which was very important to me, is that my mum loved me with all her heart. She just didn't have it to give me what I needed as a child. And also her relationship with my dad was very strained, and she couldn't bear to live with him anymore.
Yeah. And so now you're living sort of in pretty rough part of Southend, and I guess it's just getting a bit worse for you. Do you want to explain some of that?
So in the I think it was mid 80s to the late 80s, I started, late 80s I'd say, I started getting into the criminal side. Obviously I'd started signing on, I never worked, started claiming benefits and living in the bedsit land, and all the criminal activities started. So although the heroin and crack didn't come along until a couple of years later, I was already going out, drinking every day, smoking weed, doing a bit of speed, doing a bit of cocaine if we had the money to do it. So we were going out shoplifting. I think one of my first arrests were in 1987. I got arrested for a bit of fraud. I think me and my friend were working some checkbooks, and my criminal life just kind of escalated from that point. Shoplifting and drug running, and I just didn't know anything else. It felt like everything I'd learned back at home, all that normality, all the normal became abnormal, and all the abnormal became normal for me very quickly.
Yeah, and how old would you have been back then?
Late teens, 19, 20.
So you sort of
19.
Got a few years. You're a few years got to know everybody. I guess. Was it in Southend, and was there like was there sort of a lot of people behaving that way, and there's a lot of gang or groups?
It wasn't really a gang. I was just groups of people. I think there weren't such things as gangs really at that point. I think that the skinhead kind of era died down, and then I started hanging around down the seafront, which was quite close to York Road, and there was a few kind of people down there that really looked after me. The old seafront, well-known people down there. I think I worked in a little hot dog stall making burgers and hot dogs for a little while on the side of, as well as signing on. So we just lived to go out and drink and committing different sorts of crime. That was it.
So
That was all my life consisted of.
so it's like a bit of a sort of a culture uh, down
Yes,
there.
definitely.
Yeah.
Seafront culture, yeah.
All right.
In the late 80s, late 80s, yeah.
And so you were sort of involved in crime for all them years as well.
Yep, petty crime always kind of grows into not petty crime at some stage,
Yeah.
unless you learn your lesson.
So where did that sort of escalate to?
So, so from that times, then I kind of met a couple of people. We used to go drinking in a pub called the Dickens in Southend, and this would have been 88, 89, 90, and there was kind of the big faces that used to drink in there as well, and there was a couple of people that took heroin, and so I was knocking about with these people. We were just doing cocaine and going out drinking, and then the rave scene kind of come up in 1989, and I met some people who were taking heroin, but I never was interested in taking it. I never was interested. I used to hate the people that used to deal it. I used to know the people that used to come up and give my friend heroin, and I really, really, absolutely was dead against it. And then during the rave scene, when we was going out raving and taking ecstasy and doing a bit of cocaine, I remember one day sitting in the back of a car outside of a pub, and we was all eating. We'd been up all night, and my friend said, "I'll give us a bit of that. Let me have a couple of lines of heroin to come down on," and that was it. And in my mind, because I still am not educated, I don't understand what addiction's all about. I still had this thing in my mind that people chose to end up like they ended up. I was smoking heroin to come down off of the ecstasy, not to become a junkie. I was just smoking it to come down off the ecstasy. I never once ever dreamt or thought that I'd end up becoming a heroin addict, becoming a low bottom heroin addict. I thought that I was involved in the decisions on what I'd done when I was taking heroin, but it ended up that I definitely wasn't involved in any decisions.
So even for you, then up to them, that was sort of doing the ecstasy. That was sort of normal growing up. But then in that car
that was life.
doing the heroin, that threw a bit of a curveball and sent you down a different path.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that everyone around me was doing it. Everyone was in a criminal lifestyle. Everyone was shoplifting. There were fences or drug dealing, or by this time as well, I'd been out and done a couple of runs and bought some drugs over from Amsterdam and Ostend, and earned a little bits of money doing that. And I think for me, it didn't just give me access to drugs, it also gave me an identity. I was so desperate to have an identity because I didn't feel like I had one. I felt important. I felt like I was something. Yeah, definitely done. It gave me a status, I think. And so yeah, smoking heroin for a little while, and then I met the father of my child. I met him in. I think he just got out of prison for doing some sort of gun charge. He was a little bit younger than me, and I met him, and basically met him in a crack house while we was taking heroin, and we was like Bonnie and Clyde. I just really loved him, really felt like I loved him. I'd found someone that loved me, or it felt like that he loved me, for the first time ever.
Yeah. And so, where was you living now, though? You
still in Bedsit Land in Southend, in a different place than York Road now. We just moved in and around Southend in Bedsits. We're just selling drugs in Bedsit Land, selling £10 bags of heroin, moving little bits of weed and puff as well at one point. That ended up fizzling out because we ended up in the Class A scene. So then, me and Darren got together, we became an item, and we got a small flat in Westcliff. And, in Southend, I think it was. We ended up in Westcliff when I was pregnant. But, we ended up in a flat selling drugs, basically.
So how different was that relationship then? Like sort of going on the idea that, you felt that something was missing in your life, and then you found someone that loved you for the first time. I mean, I guess that must have made a massive difference to you, the way that you felt about yourself.
Massive
and what was going
difference
on.
to me. Massive difference to me. Go on.
So you weren't unhappy at that point? I guess that gave your life a lift.
Give my life a massive lift. I think at the time, I could never see me being apart from him. I thought that was me and him together for the rest of our lives, like this Bonnie and Clyde ideal. I loved his mum very much. I still love his mum very much. She's been such a good woman in my life. Without her, I would never, have had the opportunities that I've had with my daughter. She's really helped us along the way, and Darren's family were a bit of stability to me. The first bit of stability that I'd experienced in a long time.
And they all knew you were doing drugs and what you were doing?
Well, I think she had an idea. I don't think she was clear from the day dot, but I think she might have. Eventually, she had an idea. I know that some of Darren's family was upset that I got with Darren because I think me and Darren met at the time we met. We was both on the same kind of exploring with Class A's, and we both met, and then it just went. Shoo.
So it looked like you led him astray.
We both escalated. Yeah, definitely. And I spoke to one of his family members not so long ago, and she said, "Oh, I wish Darren had never met anyone that uses and so on and so on." And I felt like a little bit that she was having a little pop at me, and I just let her talk because I understand she's devastated. I get it because he's not in a great way, and
I guess when you meet
what
someone
I did say to her was that
when you meet someone in a crack house, it's not you led him there, was it? It was already happening, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And the fact is that I met Darren when he got out of prison for a gun charge.
Yeah.
So, that's what I said to her. I said, the truth is, that's when I met him. Yeah. That's all right as well. The whole family is absolutely devastated, I think, because of the current situation with him.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can come on a little bit of that. So you got a flat, you're happy, then you got pregnant?
Yeah, I ended up, got pregnant, and then it started, then I had to go into a detox, and I think I had to wait about a month or something before I went into a detox, and I remember my dad saying my dad came up to see me with Lindsay, and he said, if I ever hear that you're taking heroin with that baby inside you, I'm going to make sure you never get to keep it. So although my dad had his unwell ways, there was still bits of good in him. When I look at my dad, I don't see everything negative. There was lots of good, caring things about him. And so I went and had this. I was pregnant. We were living in South Church Road at the time, and we was getting up to criminal activities, shoplifting, selling drugs, and then I had to go and have a detox, obviously because I was pregnant, which was horrific. And I think that time that I was pregnant, because there was no recovery there, no one ever said to me rehab or go to a meeting or you know, I never remember that being offered to me. And so that during that period of me being pregnant and not using, I think it would have been better personally if I'd have used through the pregnancy, because I was so distressed. I remember kicking doors down and people using in my flat. The situation was horrific. I was so distressed. All I wanted to do was use.
So you just got like you wasn't in a detox centre. You just got a couple of like
detox in the local Rochford hospital.
Just like a week or two.
I think it's about 2-3 weeks or something.
Oh, and then you're at home doing nothing.
It was horrific. Yeah. Nothing. Just driving. Honestly, it drove me insane. I can honestly say that was one of the worst periods of my life, because I had no treatment. No. The drugs have been taken away. I'm left with myself, and all I want to do is use. And all the people around me were still using, and even that pregnancy is very hazy to me as well. I'm sure I would have got a little bit of a boot in a couple of times during that pregnancy, but I can't. To be honest, I can't remember it. Jodie was born without a habit, so that was good. But I can't say that the distress that I was experiencing would have been any good for her at all. I should imagine that some of the anxiety and so on that she suffers from now is a lot to do with that.
Was you kind of happy to be pregnant apart from that? I mean, was that sort of part of your life plan to have children?
I think that I wanted that deep down in my subconscious, but I just didn't. There was no plan. There was no plan. Definitely
like,
not a plan.
Get pregnant, it's going to fix everything. You're going to stop drinking and live happily ever after.
No plan. We didn't want to stop. I didn't even think about stopping at that point. Absolutely not. And it wasn't just the drug taking, it was also the lifestyle that I was leading, because everything was going well for us at the time. We had money, we were selling lots of bits of drugs, and the criminality was bringing us in. We was having a good life, or so we thought. And I was really in love. I really loved him.
How long after you give birth?
Sad existence, really.
How long after you give birth do you think you was back using again?
I was using as soon as my waters broke. Yeah. As soon as I remember sitting with Jodie's dad in my front room. In the front room, we was living in Westcliff at the time, and we got lots of lovely little, like Darren's mum really treated us. She was so good to us, and I think she was so excited for Darren's daughter to be born. And as soon as the waters broke, I had some heroin in my hand, literally. Yeah. I couldn't wait to use. I couldn't wait yet. And when I went to give birth, when I was in the hospital, there was me, Darren, and his mum, and I just started really crying and saying, "Oh, I've just taken some heroin." I just started breaking down. Then the reality started I could feel some reality and some emotion, and I just really started crying because I'd used and I was trying to give birth. It was terrible. Yeah. It was horrific.
So now you got all that going on and a baby.
All that going on and a baby, and I remember my dad coming up the hospital, and I was in the toilet smoking some gear, and I could hear him, Sonja, where? And I was in the toilet, and when I walked out of the toilet, he must have seen my eyes, and he must have just thought, he never said anything, but he must have been devastated. He must have been absolutely devastated. And but saying that about the drugs, and it's all I could think about, when Jodie was actually born, honestly, it was the most, I'll never forget it. It was the most precious time, and I felt my heart open up. I loved her so much, but I couldn't get clean for her. I loved her with all of my heart, every single fibre of her being. I absolutely adored her, but I just couldn't get clean for her. I didn't even know it was a choice. I didn't even think about it. I didn't even even when I started using, when the waters broke, I'd never thought that there was a choice that I could stay clean, or there wasn't even in question. I just wanted to use. Obsession to use was so high.
Yeah, it's difficult with these podcasts, I think, because you could go on so much about every little area, because there's so many relationships and things going on. But and again, I think people that have been there can understand the experience. I just don't think people that have been to that place have got a clue how much is actually going on in people's lives and how chaotic it is. And you know, because on the outside, everyone's desperately trying to look normal and everything's okay, trying to prop it all up. And so, what kind of happened with Jodie? As you maybe we focus on that for a little bit. What happened to Jodie growing up?
So Jodie stayed with us. I had Jodie for the first 2 years, and so we eventually ended up in a high-rise block in a place called Blackdown Flats in Southend, and my dad helped Darren do the place up. It was really nice. We had a lovely little flat, and we were selling drugs from the flat, and Jodie was a tiny baby, and she had all the clothes that she wanted, and for a time everything was going good, apart from the fact that we was obviously taking heroin and crack, and then when the crack really hit the scene, 1989, 90. Jodie was born in 94, I think it was. Crack was well on its way by this time, and so Jodie spent much of her time like knocking at the kitchen door, "Mummy, mummy, mummy," and I'd have my foot against the door, stopping her from coming in. Don't let her in here, don't let her in here, while I'm smoking crack and taking heroin. So Jodie's environment was totally hostile. People coming in to buy drugs. She lived in a hostile environment, even though I loved her, I didn't have the capacity to give her love, nurture her, give her time, make sure she's fed, warm, you know. She had the very, very basics for the first year or two. But when she went, the police came through our door regularly. The police came through our door, drug bust. I remember Hazel Harley, she was the head of the drug squad. She was so lovely. She was such a really supportive, nice woman. She came through our door regularly, and she knew Jodie on first name terms. And it was just devastating. Must have been devastating for Jodie, not knowing what's going on. Like, her security's been threatened, her emotional and her kind of home security's been threatened. And it looks like these police are threatening it, but really it's us that are putting it a threat. So that kind of for the first couple of years, and then me and Darren, obviously because the crack had well hit us by then, and we started arguing. Darren was one of the sorts of people that he'd get a parcel of crack, and he could sell 3/4 of it or half of it, get the money back, and then we'd have the rest to smoke. I wasn't like that. I couldn't even comprehend putting crack away, thinking that you got to sell it to get the money back. I just couldn't understand that. I just wanted to smoke crack all night. So even though he's definitely an addict, I was absolutely horrific. I'd rather go and search the yellow pages and walk up the streets and look for crack than go to sleep. I was just absolutely crack crazed, and we ended up arguing and fighting. And I think that I just couldn't bear him near me, and it wasn't anything to do with him physically. It was just where the crack had got me at that point. And so we started arguing and fighting. Then one night, Darren's mum and my dad, I think I phoned my dad up and said, "Come and get me, I can't bear it anymore." And Darren's mum and my dad came round, and they come and got me. I think Darren went to his mum's, and me and Jodie stayed there, and I was going to try and get clean. He was going to try and get clean. I don't know how we was going to do that, because there was no help, no support. We didn't have anyone to help us, no kind of professionals or no meetings. I didn't know any of anything. And then I think Darren at that point, he went off with someone else. That might have been already brewing by one of the girls that was coming around to buy drugs from us, someone that I knew. That kind of relationship might have already been brewing from her coming round. Who knows? That's not really important for me. But Darren at this point had gone. I stayed at home trying to get clean, didn't have an idea of what getting clean meant. I didn't have an idea of recovery, didn't know anything about rehab, didn't know anything about getting support, didn't have a clue about anything. Hence, needless to say, that I ended up using still, and so did Darren. And then the journey, my life, totally, from that moment, for the next few years, my life went downhill. So that must have been 94, 96. So I carried on using for another 8 years, and it went from pitiful demoralisation. It went from bad to worse very, very quickly. I lost my flat. I went to prison at one point.
Oh,
I
Jodie was gone by then. Jodie was at an end by then.
Yeah, social services said that thankfully Lindsay stood up and went to see my probation officer one day when she see a 1 mil needle in my place when she come to get her. She obviously then could see that I'd started injecting. And Lindsay thankfully went to speak to my probation officer. My probation officer obviously made the safeguarding referral, and thankfully, and so Jodie had to go with Lindsay when she was 2 years old. We had all the social services meetings, and then the agreement took place that she was going to go to Lindsay's on this certain day. And this is horrific for me. So I came out of this meeting. It's been agreed the date that Jodie's going to Lindsay's. And I remember standing outside this meeting, me, Lindsay, and a social worker, and I was like lost. And I said to the social worker, "So what's going to happen now then?" And this is all that she had for me. Well, you're either going to go one way or the other. That was it. That was all I remember her having. I don't remember ever being supported into rehab, recovery, drug service. I don't remember any of it. But then from that moment on, my life went downward. It went on a downward spiral, very painful.
What was happening to you?
So then I had the freedom, even though I put Jodie in some very dangerous situations when she was with me. Now that she was gone, I had nothing to worry about. I lost my flat a few years later. For numerous reasons, I think for the drugs and that we were selling there, and I just couldn't keep it up. I didn't know about paying bills. I just didn't know how to function in normal life at this point. My flat, they boarded my flat up, and then I became homeless again. But from that period on, it was I can't remember much of it. It was a haze. I remember sleeping in crack houses, spent a lot of time in prison, in and out of prison. I remember that shoplifting, I'd worn all them resources. They were all finished because I was so well known to the police. All the shoplifting squad knew me by first name terms. I'd been barred out of Southend High Street. I wasn't allowed in any road in Southend High Street or any road adjacent. So the criminal stuff was, all the plan Bs were being cut off. So I ended up in the red light area in Southend and started doing that for a little bit of time. But at this time, my mental health and my physical health were absolutely terrible. It was a real kind of time in my life where I guess I needed an intervention. I needed a family intervention to come and get me to stay.
How many times have you been in jail up to that point?
So I've been to jail, I think 13 or 14 times altogether.
So you had a lot of interventions, but more trying to sort of punish you,
Yeah.
was it, for...
Yeah, definitely. I think that the prison officers that I kind of got familiar with, I always got on with them, and they always say, "Oh, Sonja's back again." Like, "Oh, what are you doing?" Like, and I just didn't have any answers for them. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I didn't know what to do about it. I didn't have any. I'd kind of cut off any help that I possibly potentially could have had by a lot of my friends that weren't addicts, because of my behaviour was literally despicable towards the end. I became all of that stuff about being loved. I started to do that to myself, as you said.
Yeah, well, and again,
I made it impossible to love me.
again, because we talk about all that, that's all a lot of that external stuff. What was it like inside you on a daily basis at that time? You know, what were you dealing with as a person?
Survival, definitely midbrain. When you talk about recovery in the frontal cortex and the midbrain, I was definitely living in the midbrain. It was just survival of the fittest. It became like a dog eat dog world, literally in and out of prison, a dog eat dog world. Literally, all I cared about was getting £10 or £20 or £50 to get some white and brown so that I could survive the next
By
day.
then, you're willing to do
That was all it consisted of.
absolutely anything
Absolutely anything.
to get it.
Absolutely, I literally sold my soul, for heroin and crack to survive.
And so, what kind of? I mean, look, we could go on forever talking about, you know, where that took you and what you experienced and the darkness of all that addiction. Because again, I mean, that's completely damaging in itself. You know, even if you're damaged before you started that journey, being on that journey is mostly demoralising and destroys you. Like you say, you're pretty much like you're selling your soul, it feels like, but your mind's under incredible pressure and being really bent out of shape and being separated completely from society, even in prison. I think, you know, I think when you consider this problem, prison's probably about the worst place you could possibly put somebody with that problem. And so what brought all that to an end?
So, honestly, so thankfully at the end, I couldn't have got clean on my own resources. I'm not one of them people that someone gives you the CA helpline or the NA helpline number and you phone it up and you say, come and meet me outside the meeting and let's go to a meeting. I could never have done that. By the time I got arrested at the end for the 4 street robberies in 2004, all my teeth were gone. I was 6 stone. I had track marks all up my neck, all bruises, emphysema spread all around my face. I had nothing and no one. And I'd helped create that. My addiction had helped create that. And I ended up getting the 4 years for the street robberies, which was the best intervention that someone like me could have ever had. It took me out of that life and it put me into a safer space. And I ended up in one of the most wonderful prisons that you could ever dream about ending up in. I ended up in HM Prison Downview, where thankfully the majority of the prison officers were very caring, really caring and cared about people. And my drug worker in the prison...
Was that prison designed to be like that, Son?
I don't think so. It was one of the first prisons to have the RACT in there, but RACT was no longer in there when I went there.
Was that like a change?
The 12-step and the RACT stuff.
Was that like a change in the prison system at that point? Then do you think that there was a bit more help or a bit more awareness, or?
Well, I think it's because I was doing the long sentence. All the other sentences that I'd ever done were very in and out. So honestly, I felt glad to be able to get in there, get on my script, get off my script and settle down and not think of, because all the other sentences that had been go in, get on your methadone, come off the methadone in 9 days and then just feel like that for 9 days or so many weeks, and then you're out again. So it was just really, the short prison sentences are about getting in, detoxed, fatten up, and look forward to getting out again.
Just kind of making you
And
worse, I guess that is, isn't it?
terrible, yeah.
Yeah.
So then you'd get your kind of money, your discharge grant at the end of it, and you're already planning to get 3 and 2 up King's Cross or wherever was the closest place, get 3 white and 2 brown. That was already been planned, but this time I had a chance to settle. I had a chance to sit still and think about what had gone on. And thankfully, Lindsay brought Jodie up to see me a few times, which were very difficult visits. She was only 13 at the time, and I can't remember how old I must have been 36 at the time. So they were very difficult to me because I started coming to terms with the damage that I'd caused myself and for Jodie and for everyone around me. I started coming to terms with it. I think it took my brother came up. No, my brother sent me some clothes and a couple of bits of money while I was in there, and it took him time to kind of come round and defrost from the poison that I'd kind of spread along to everyone. But I think that the prison sentence gave me time to sit and reflect. My key worker, my drug worker in the prison, she was an Al-Anon member. Her 2 sons were drug addicts, and she could see something in me which I couldn't see in myself. And what she could see, I think, that there was room to move because I was kind of hit my bottom, and I was in there was nowhere else for me to go. I'd come to the end of myself.
And you wanted to change then
I think
as well,
she could
did you?
see. Yeah. I didn't know what it meant. Didn't know what change meant. I didn't know what recovery even consisted of, but I was willing to go and do it. So she was the one that put me forward to go into rehab. And the funny thing was I'd never had any experience with 12-step before. I didn't know anyone that had got clean through 12-step. But when we were going through the books, looking at all the different rehabs, honestly, this has come from nowhere, literally. I was looking at all the different rehabs in the book, and I said, I'll go anywhere apart from 12-step. I ain't doing that. And then I ended up going to this therapeutic environment rehab. I think it was just outside Watford. And I went there and had an assessment, and I got accepted into this rehab. And it ended up when Southend Borough Council got in contact with them, and they found out the prices for this rehab. Southend Borough Council rejected it. They said, we can't pay that. We've got another rehab for you. And it ended up being a 12-step one. The only one that they could afford was this 12-step one. So I ended up there anyway. And that's where I first started getting an idea of what 12 steps was, what it meant. And when I first walked in there, everyone said, yeah, we're sick people. We're just here getting better. And I honestly thought in my head, is like, not me. There's nothing wrong with me. I just need to stop taking heroin. I thought that someone was going to literally switch a switch or give me this one-liner that's going to help me stop taking heroin. I never had any clue of what was wrong with me. I didn't understand about the obsessive nature of our minds. I didn't understand anything about the allergic reaction that we have to alcohol and drugs.
You're just kind of getting on the bridge now, and I mean, and it is amazing, isn't it, how little we know about that, but how powerful them judgments are. I don't want it. I ain't doing it. But really know nothing about it. But then you start learning. I mean, what did it feel like for you learning that stuff? Because I guess that's must be, if you've not really sort of come across it, what was it like being in group therapy and that kind of thing?
So again, definitely midbrain. My brain is underdeveloped. Not only didn't it develop over the years of me growing up through my teens and then my early 20s, not only didn't it develop, I'd gone backwards. I'd abused myself so much with alcohol, drugs and the lifestyle and a lack of love, healthy love. I think my brain had definitely it was definitely underdeveloped. So being in the environment of people that are trying to care for me, and in the group therapy, was horrific. I can honestly say it felt horrific in the group therapy, trying to identify how I felt. I was so void of anything I felt. I didn't even know. All I thought about really was drugs and boys. That was all I had to think about.
Which is kind
when
of
I was
like
first getting clean.
both of your addictions, really, weren't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think I just didn't have it. Midbrain. When I think about my state at that point, definitely midbrain. There was no healthy thought processes. There was no ability to kind of risk assess, look to the future, risk assess. No ability to take care of myself. No ability to do anything healthy. Didn't have the brain capacity to do anything healthy or functioning. Everything was just real midbrain stuff to feel good for the next 30 seconds. Feel good for the next 30 seconds in whatever form that was. It was a painful place, and I never want to be a newcomer again. Ever want to be a newcomer again.
And so what happened there then?
So I think that I did, after I came out, went to the rehab. I didn't last in the rehab very long, as you can imagine, with the midbrain behaviour. I couldn't behave myself. I just couldn't settle. My brain just couldn't take it. It was shocking for me. And I did, after I left the prison, was in that rehab, I did use a couple of times. I did use a couple of times after coming out the at prison. I come out in the February, and February 2006, and I got 3 months clean. I ended up in Watford in the sober living houses with you and the crew there in Watford, and I used 2 or 3 times. I got 3 months clean, then I'd explode, then I'd get 3 months clean again. And then I'd explode again. But my process is that I never stopped going to meetings. I never stopped trying. I knew that this was the last house on the block for me. And from you and all the guys there, I remember Sarah, Christine, Lisa Donald, all the guys, Hilda. I remember all the guys there in Watford. They became my family. They kind of loved me and kind of nurtured me back into life again. And I kind of started to experience stuff that I hadn't experienced probably all my life, or for a long time anyway in my life. And I remember the last time I used in October 2006. I kind of remember hitting my bottom. My bottom was nothing to do with anything external, because my life at that point was the best it's ever been. Physically, externally, my life was the best it's ever been, but it became so painful how I felt inside that, I know it's corny, but a lot of people say that something snapped inside of me, and I haven't thought about using and drinking since then. Haven't thought about using and drinking for 16 years, 17 years nearly.
But how would you, if you could go back to then, how would you describe your mental condition, like your mental health? How would you describe your mental health at that point, even though you're
if I'd have had the capacity at that point to articulate how I felt, I could have gone to the doctors, I'm sure, and been diagnosed with ADHD, split personality disorder, bipolar. I definitely, honestly, my mental health. Someone would walk by me in a meeting and they'd say, "Oh, hi Sonja, how you doing?" And I honestly used to take that as a personal attack, and I'd want to ask them how I was doing. I didn't have any idea how I felt. I felt so void of myself, and I was so self-conscious and so raw. Everything was so raw. I literally felt schizophrenic. The anxiety, the how I felt in my mind, all the ADHDs, the bipolar, split personality disorder, I could have been diagnosed with all of it.
Yeah, see, that's the bit I kind of
That's how I
wanted to
felt.
focus on with this idea of the bridge,
Mm.
because I think it's easy for people. I don't know whether they do, but I think they kind of hope that you kind of come out of all of that craziness with your brain completely smashed to pieces, and then you know then you have all these emotional difficulties, which you definitely have. But then you need kind of remedicating to deal with all of them emotional issues that that even though it was quite difficult, it's still doable. That you still made it through, using all of the tools and the support and the people around you. And again, thinking of how damaged that your brain was, and how, even like saying that, how capable of you were you of having relationships then? How capable of you were going and
That's
getting a
all I
job?
wanted. Absolutely. I remember saying to you once, I don't want to work in Asda's.
No,
I
I
ain't
ain't
going to
getting,
work in
not for less
Asda's.
than a tenner an hour. I ain't getting up.
And then I remember you saying to me, they wouldn't have you. They wouldn't have you. But that was really a lesson for me. When some little things that you've said along the years, it's really kind of pierced into my heart, and I thought, oh my God, he's right. Like I'm unemployable. I was unemployable, for the first couple of years of my recovery. I definitely, I didn't, although I wanted to work, I was rebellious. I didn't like being told what to do. I couldn't hear. I couldn't listen. I couldn't take direction. So it would have been very difficult to employ me. But thankfully, I went down there. I'd done quite a lot of voluntary work in my early years, and I learned a lot kind of through that process. Thanks, I think Heroin House. There was another rehab that you put me in touch with. I went and done some I think it was. I went and done some stuff there. I volunteered for the sober living houses at first. So, yeah, I think that all that stuff I'd done in very early recovery. I remember doing some college courses. That kind of in the first couple of years that put me in good stead to understanding about employment, what it means to be able to work, to be able to listen to people, to be able to take direction. If someone was telling me what to do, honestly, I just want to rebel against it, or I don't like being told what to do. I just want to do it why are you telling me what to do? That's what I always used to say. Again, it felt like a personal attack.
Yeah.
Everything felt like a personal attack.
So how much support do you think it takes for someone like you to recover?
Well, I think that.
I mean, when I say like you, I mean you were pretty low bottom. You'd been proper down to the bottom of the barrel. I don't know if it could got any worse. I don't know if you could find anybody worse than where you got to, the way you were living your life, the damage to you, all of the abuses, and whether it be yourself or other people, and the drugs. I don't think you could have been more broken as a person. Just trying to, but again, just that idea of the bridge. It's like, what you find on there, and what do you think? If you didn't get them the massive amount of support, do you think there'd be any chance for you?
Absolutely no chance whatsoever. I think that, whenever I talk to people about my journey, I think that the most important thing for me was having some mature 12-steppers, mature God-centered 12-steppers around me, who were able to love me through my process, and also from my brokenness, even though I rebelled and it was very difficult for me, I'd learned to trust you guys, and I kind of gave you. It's an unspoken thing, really. I'd given you permission to challenge me, even though I didn't like it at times. It was kind of it was kind of a bond that I'd made with you and a few others, that that permission was there. And I think that I found it difficult, and I think I made life difficult probably for you and other people as well, because it wasn't it wasn't easy being around me, I guess, in the early days. Not all the time, but I guess at times.
Only the first 10 years. You softened up a bit after 10 years.
I literally.
I think that's about. I'm not even joking. I think people noticed, didn't it? That I think.
Yeah.
I mean, 10 years. You just seemed to soften all of a sudden, and then a real change started to happen where you weren't so defensive or so withdrawn. I mean, because at the beginning you were so withdrawn, you used to literally like somebody switch you off. You'd just go completely withdrawn, shut down, shut your eyes and turn off. And you'd have to wait for you to sort of switch back on again. It was like you're like a computer crashing. And then it had to be rebooted, and it was literally, I'd have to say sometimes, Sonja, can you hear me? Move your finger, and you just wiggle your finger, and that's about all. So it's coming from there. And then, being incredibly defensive. Because again, I think it's that brain, isn't it? It's just that brain is so damaged. But again, I think the miracle of it is seeing that. But even having all of them mental and emotional issues are wrapped around the person that you are inside, but that person still managed to navigate away through all of that. Which again is pretty painful. There's a lot of pain in there in recovery. There's a lot of upset, a lot of stress, a lot of strain, a lot of emotional traumas and difficulties, and some terrible realities to face. About yourself.
It's the emotional development and the brain development, I think.
Yeah, because I see one thing people don't like is looking at themselves, and I think just talking to Matt today is really saying that. But when you're that bad, you have to look at yourself, and it's like the last thing anyone wants to do, especially when you've got so much difficulty, so much trauma, so much hurt, so much guilt, so much shame. That it seems it takes that level of brokenness to be, we call it the gift of desperation in recovery, that we become so desperate that we're willing to look at ourselves and walk with that person, which is us, through all of the pain, through all of the difficulty, through all of the fears, all of the anxieties. I mean, even for myself, it's like, being in friendships when there's arguments or pressures or challenging. I mean, it can almost be like I'd rather kill myself than challenge someone. That's when you've got that feeling, that desire to run away from the situation or myself, can be like literally just overwhelming. And just watching the people, like yourself. And I think this is where the program's so important, isn't it? That it just gives you the tools, and like you said, of the people around you that understand the tools. I think that's an important part, isn't it? Because it's like, look, I can't do this for you, but if you listen, and I could tell you the steps to take. They call it the 12 steps, but that converts into very real life processes. And it's like saying, look, I can't promise it's going to be easy. In actual fact, I can promise you it ain't going to be easy. But if you take these steps and take the direction that we're offering to you, you can not only walk through that, but you can actually grow through that. And
definitely, when I think about where my life is now, Lester, like we're taking into consideration the very underdeveloped close to death human being in 2004 when I went to prison compared to me now, I think that it's nothing short of a miracle, honestly. Like, I'm back in Southend now, living in a flat, in one of my daughter's flats. My daughter's flat, and my relationship with her is literally, we were estranged for many years when she was with her nan, and since she lived with me in Suffolk for 7 years, and then she came back here, and then I ended up coming back here. So my relationship with her is absolute. I couldn't hope. It's a life beyond my wildest dreams. So my relationship with her now is beyond what I'd ever dreamt. I never ever thought that I'd be where I'm at with her today. Like, I just feel, I mean, we both got our issues. I think we're a lot better than what we were, and we've definitely got our issues. I mean, she's got 2 addict parents. One's in recovery, one's not. I've got an absent mother. My mum's passed away. I've got a dad that's not very well. So we've definitely both got our issues, but we make the best of it, with what we've got. And I'm so proud of her, so proud of her for how far she's come and how graciously she forgave me and let me back into her life again.
She did punish you for a
while.
while.
Where really she had the right to never let me back.
She punished you for a bit. But you let her, didn't you? That was part of it, wasn't it? I think so. I think that when you kind of think about the years that I was absent in her life. Yeah, definitely. But I think that's a good thing about the program as well, isn't it?
Honestly, an amazing kid.
That she went through a relationship with you, and you stuck in there with her as well and worked through it. But that's not an overnight matter either, is it? That's an ongoing.
No, definitely. I remember making my first amends to her, and when you go through your first kind of amends, and I remember it took her 12 years of me being clean for her to tell me about myself, and it was nothing about me in active addiction. It was about me in recovery. I guess the hurt would have been springboarded from the neglect, but it was everything to do with me in recovery. And because most of it was true, if you ever want your inventory taken, get one of your family members to do it. So most of it was true, and I just honoured her. Yeah, you're right. I think children that have been abandoned need to be listened to, need to be heard, and their feelings need to be acknowledged. Don't tell them that they're feeling it wrong, because that was my first initial response. I just wanted to say, no, it's not. But I learned to respond rather than to react, and just let her express how she felt and honour it. And that was very important for her. But also that took me 12 years to be able to do that. That took her 12 years to be able to have the courage to say it, and for me to be able to respond like that.
Yeah.
Because I'm so sensitive and such a fragile human being. Yeah,
well, I guess there's a lot of guilt as well, isn't there? When you, I find that's always a bit difficult with mothers, that they really struggle to get past the guilt. They don't like you there. They don't want to own it. They often want to sort of try and justify why they behave that way, rather than acknowledging from their child, look, that was right, it was wrong, and you were right. And I'm sorry for how much damage it did to you, and what can we do to repair it now? It's nice to be, but again, even that's a gift to get to that place.
I think it's
that's a journey.
I think that it's very difficult for mothers to be able to face what they've done to their children, the neglect and the all the stuff that goes hand in hand. You can't be a crack and heroin lover and have the capacity to bring up your children in a healthy manner, I don't believe.
No, and
you
can't get rid of guilt unless you're willing to own it, accept that you've done wrong, and ask for forgiveness, and make the amends. Is what we learn, isn't it? If you're not, people not willing to do that, they get trapped with the guilt.
Mm.
I think
Yeah, definitely.
it's just an important thing, I think, for
If I
people
could
to
go
know
back and
that.
change it, it'd be lovely. But it's just not something that can be changed. The past is the past, and now the present is the present, and the future hopefully is going to bring lovely, wonderful things for us, which it already has been.
Yeah, because again, just even sort of Jodie coming back in your life to that degree, again, like you say, that's kind of a 12-year journey just there, isn't it? Just getting to that point.
Yeah, yeah,
Of,
yeah, yeah.
but
Mm.
it couldn't have happened any quicker than that because probably neither of you
No,
are
definitely
able.
not.
So I always find this about. I want to do a podcast on forgiveness because the more I learn about forgiveness, it's not just something you just say and then all of a sudden everything's great. It's like we did that podcast about the one shoe that you can forgive people,
Mm.
but it's still being forgiving someone doesn't stop them being dysfunctional. Forgiving them doesn't
Yeah,
stop
yeah,
you being dysfunctional, but it is kind of like the doorway
yeah.
that you can walk through to start working on developing, and that can take time. I often
Mm.
think of like, look, it's all right if if someone stabs you with a knife and then pulls the knife out, I can go, oh, I forgive you, but excuse me for being a little bit sensitive towards you for a while. Apart from the fact I've got a gaping wound that needs healing, um, so I think forgiveness is something that really needs a lot more conversation. Again, I realise that I've had to learn. Some people in my life, it's just not been a one-time deal. It's bit of an ongoing
Mm.
process that I've had to work at, uh, especially
Mm.
with them childhood stuff, because that seems, it seems very hard to heal from childhood wounds,
Yeah.
even as an adult.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine as a child, or when you're growing up, and thinking, right, I'm going to start. It just wouldn't happen, when you think about the catastrophic damage that you cause through addiction with having children. Like no one in their right minds would think about. No one in their right minds would think about um, start taking drugs, can't stop taking drugs, have children, damage their lives, they go into care or to the care of the parents or social services care. No one ever makes a plan to do that.
No, it's kind of
It's
like the
it's
opposite. It's like the opposite
yeah,
plan that anyone would make.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But it has such catastrophic lifelong effects on us.
yeah. Well, I think we're coming to the end of this podcast, but I think it would be nice at some point to just talk about that relationship and all that you kind of went through and how it sort of played out, because I think you've got a lot of great insight. Well, you've kind of been successful in that journey. And again, it wasn't a quick journey. So, like being on that bridge, which you still are, I guess you're closer to what would be considered normal living, but it's an ongoing journey. But all of them different relationships, I think they're important for people to talk about and to
Mm.
realise that look, you can still make it even if it's difficult. You can still make it if you fall off the bridge, you can get back on it at any time. But you are going to need a lot of support, and I think that's one of the things I kind of try and be an advocate. Is that the
Yeah,
word? In recovery,
yeah.
is that some people just need a hell of a lot of treatment and they need a hell of a lot of support. And if they're not getting it, they're just not going to recover. And you can't be angry at them because
Mm.
if you don't give them all the help they need, they can't do it for themselves. And again, like addiction,
Mm.
you don't, if you need X amount of insulin, if you're a diabetic, but you only get given a quarter of what you need, you're going to stay sick. And I think that's what needs to be understood about addiction is that, look, if you don't understand this problem, you're not going to understand how much treatment and support some people need. And it doesn't have to be overly expensive, but it does need to be understood. And I think the more it gets understood, because it is better in the community, because again, but people need them very strong relationships, and people need to understand, look, you have to stay in these difficult relationships with these difficult people if they're going to change. Because I think all of us, if it wasn't for the people that were there to help us, I don't think any of us would make it. And I think this is where sort of alcoholics and addicts become the real solution to this problem, not the professionals, because the professionals are not going to be there as much as the fellowship. So as much as people may be against the 12 steps, they should really understand the benefits of that fellowship, which again, all the local services are trying to mimic. They're trying to create that fellowship and, that where people can come together. But again, I think there's still something missing in that. I think it's just that understanding it. I know that you sort of work in them services now. And could you imagine? Would you think the treatment now in them services in Southend, if you was back where you was when you come to the end of your road, do you think there'd be enough help in the services now? Do you think we've come a long way since you were ready for the help?
I think that probably not. I think that because there's 5 of us that work in where I'm working at the moment, and it's looking after over 40 people. So I think I need, personally, I couldn't have done it. No, I needed more one-on-one, probably connection rather than. But I think the model is really similar to kind of the sober living houses in Watford, and I think it's a good thing from the majority of people that are going to be able to find help from engaging with them. But I think that I would have probably got lost because there's probably too many clients, and the staff ratio of clients to staff is too out of balance. So I would have got lost, definitely.
And in the other service you worked in before that, I think that was even more massive for clients to staff, wasn't it?
That was the local drug and alcohol services, which they've got the most loveliest people that work there. They're really, really caring, and they're the nicest bunch of people that you could work with. I couldn't fault them in any way, but I think across the board there's a lack of understanding of addiction. So there's a lack of understanding of what to do about the problem. But I think that their hands are pretty tied up as well, because if someone's saying that they don't want to get clean and they want to carry on taking methadone, they're stuck, really. And then they just have to start risk managing rather than helping them get better. Then they have to start risk managing, that's where the naloxone comes in. That's where the needle exchange comes in. So yeah, it's just a very different approach. If someone's not wanting to get clean, it's about the risk management.
And if they do want to get clean, is it possible?
Yes, if they want to get clean, they would, I guess, if they wanted to get clean, because they speak a lot about the 12-step fellowships as well in there, which is a wonderful thing. They really encourage everyone to go to 12-step fellowships, either AACA or NA. So I think that if someone wanted to get clean, I know that there's 2 people at the moment in the new place I'm working at. There's 2 clients who have been on a script that have come down and now totally off scripts, and in the 12-step fellowships, and being supported by these lovely people that I work with. So I think if you want it above all else, and you're going to accept the help, I think you can do it.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, when I compare myself, if I compare myself to a lot of the people that are in there now, you can't. I would have needed to have gone to rehab for a few months before I went to this place. This place would have been good if I'd have been to rehab for a few months first.
Well,
But
in
I was
Southend
just
now, I guess you can
so
go to
unwell.
their groups every day, and you can go to a meeting every night, and probably some days as
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
So, and there'll be plenty of
yeah.
people. There's plenty of people there that'll be more than happy to give you guidance and support and
Yeah.
direction and
NA fellowship's
friendship,
massive
and
in Southend. AA's massive. CA's growing.
so recovery's
So
growing, isn't
there's a
it?
huge fellowship.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's a huge fellowship here, and they do a lot as well. They do a lot of activities and stuff as well.
yeah. No, that's good news, isn't it?
Yeah, no, really good news. Yeah.
Right, well, I'll bring that to an end then. And thank you very much for coming on again. I think we will have you back on again in the not too distant future to drill down on some of them areas. But thanks for sharing, Sonja. Thanks for being open and honest. And thank you very much.